Hi, I'm Beth from Restyle Pieces Boutique. Welcome back to my channel, and today I am doing a beginner-friendly video on the steps to take to paint a piece of furniture. So if you've been wanting to paint something for your home or you want to start refinishing furniture, look no further. Let's watch. So the first thing I suggest when starting to paint furniture is to find something small. Don't start with a big hutch or something, you'll get frustrated. So I started with this little table that I found. I'm cleaning it with Pure Power. It's a degreaser. It gets rid of grime and wax. I'm using my gloves, and I like to use a blue microfiber cloth. You can also use simple things like Simple Green or Crud Cutter or plain old vinegar and water. I started with vinegar and water when I first started refinishing furniture, and that works just fine. Just make sure you do the rinsing step. So here you'll see me cleaning it with my microfiber cloth. I'm spraying it liberally, and then I'm just rubbing around, making sure I get in all those crevices and cracks to clean it thoroughly. The reason you want to clean well is you don't want dirt or grime or wax repelling your paint. You want your paint to stick. So you can also use a little brush. I felt like I didn't need it in this area, even though it has some details. I got in there pretty well with my microfiber cloth, but you can use a tiny little brush to get in those places really well. And here I'm flipping it over. You want to make sure you get the underside and the places that you can't really see when you have it turned over right side up. This was a fairly clean piece, but look at all that grime and dirt that I got. Oh my goodness. So now I'm using my water, just plain water in a spray bottle. I like to use a blue rag for my cleaner and a yellow rag for my water, because if I throw them around, then I know which rag to use if I need to use it again, so I don't use the wrong rag. I'm just weird that way. So then you want to let it dry very well, and then you can just scuff sand a piece, which is, scuff sanding is just a light sanding. So I have some sponge pads here that are really flexible, and you can get into the round curves and in the crevices. So I want to use about a 150 grit. This is how much scratch there is to the pad, and normally the 150, the smaller the number, the more aggressive it is. So I just want to use a 150 to kind of scuff up this surface so that my paint will stick. You can see that I'm definitely getting some dust there, because that is me scuffing up the surface of that old finish. So I'm just speeding this up a little bit because it does take some time to scuff up that surface, and then we'll get to the next step. So the next step is to mist your rag and then clean off all of that dust so that you can have a nice surface to paint on. So it's important to let your surface dry thoroughly before you start to paint. So here I'm using a very soft 2.5 inch angled brush from Farmhouse Paint, and then I'm using a round brush. I'm going to use that on the legs because it just is an easier brush to use to paint the legs. I'm also got some blue shop tails, and I have my stir stick. I'm using Farmhouse Evolution Paint in the color Bold Black just for the base. Now, I could paint the top the same color, but I'm also going to go through a little bit of a staining instruction or staining tutorial for you in this same video. So here I am. When I dip my brush in the paint. I only want to dip it up like 1 inch or so. See, I don't have that all the brush covered up to the very top of the metal part. The metal part is called the ferrule of the brush. You want to try to avoid getting paint in there if you can. Sometimes it happens, but you only want to dip your brush in just a little bit, kind of scrape the excess off on the side of your can, the inside of your paint can, and then start painting. And you'll feel that when you are painting and it's dragging a little bit or it's not covering very well, that you're going to need to dip your brush in again. Now I'm just pushing that paint in those inside of those spindly legs so that it can get to the insides. Now I'm giving you a little close-up. So I am taking short strokes, but I try when I'm finished with an area to take one big, long, smooth stroke lightly over the whole area so that it kind of makes it a nice, flowy, smooth line that dries and it levels much better that way. So I put an old towel down at the bottom so that I didn't drip any black paint on the underside. I mean, it is the underside, but still, I don't want it to look messy. Farmhouse Evolution Paint does not need a top coat, which is perfect if you're a beginner. You don't have to use, you can save a step by not having to top coat the paint. It's very durable, and that one coat covered it really well. Now, there are still some parts that I can see a little bit of the brown coming through. So I am going to need a second coat. So instead of cleaning out my brush, I use plastic wrap. I wrap my brush up tightly, and then that's going to save it so I can use it for the second coat. I'm using artist brush. I have a set of artist brush, and I have linked everything I'm using in this video down below. So if you want to see what I've used and what products and you want to order any of those, I have an Amazon shop, and they are all going to be on my Amazon shop. So this little rim here, I wanted it painted, so that's why I got out my artist brush. It was a little bit smaller, and so I just thought, you know what? This little, the little braces in the middle of the table are pretty small too, so I'm going to go ahead and use that little artist brush to just paint those areas as well. So I'm going to wrap my artist brush now in plastic wrap because I don't want it to dry out in between coats of paint. If it gets a little dry, you can just spritz it with some water before you start, and that helps you too to make sure you have a nice smooth brush when you're starting. So here I'm flipping my table over, and I'm going to work on the apron, which is right underneath the top. So for that, I've started to use my 2.5-inch angle brush. It's a bigger brush. I can go smoothly over those big areas there on the bottom of that apron. I let that coat dry about an hour and a half, and do a second coat. And here I'm just washing out my brushes. The first thing I do before I even add any soap or brush cleaner is to get as much paint out as I can with just running water. So I'm using warm water and just cleaning those out. I'm using my fingers to try to get some of that paint off of the paintbrush. I am using Dawn dish soap. You can buy brush soaps and things to wash your paintbrushes with, and they do help to condition and keep your brushes soft. But all you need to start out is dish soap. So I'm shaking those off and I'm going to hang those up. I kind of got lazy and didn't want to wash these yet. So you can soak them for a while in just water while you're doing other things and then go back, and it's even easier to clean them. So here I am, I'm going to stain the top of this piece. So I am starting with, because this is veneer is not solid wood. It is wood, but it's a thin piece of wood they put on top of a different wood. So it's a thin piece of wood. So I'm starting with a 120 grit sandpaper on my sander. Now, this is a Festool sander with a vacuum. You don't need that. You can find a $39, $49, whatever sander that will work well for what you are starting to do. So I'm just scuffing up that surface, trying to get as much finish as I can off of that. So I am going to be sanding this to bare wood. That means I'm getting all the finish off so that I can stain it. So after I do my 120, then I wipe it off and I go to 180 grit. And this is where you will see all of that finish starting to come off very well. Sometimes I'll go to 220 grit. It depends on what the stain label says. So whatever product you're staining with, I'm using a oil-based stain. It is not gel stain. It's just regular oil-based stain. I'll show you that in a minute. And I went up to 220, I believe. I did whatever it said on the can. And now I'm taping off the bottom. I'm just using tape with plastic attached to it to tape off the bottom so I don't get any stain on my base. It's super important to use pre-stain conditioner. This is especially for oil-based stain, which is what I'm using. And it's very thin. You just saw me slap it over there and it went flying. But you just apply that with a foam brush or a rag and liberally on your piece and do whatever the can directions say. So my can directions said, apply it, let it sit for 5 to 15 minutes, and then wipe off the excess. This gets the wood ready to take stain and prevents ugly blotching and things that can happen when you have a really porous wood. So I'm wiping up all the excess, and then the label says you want to do your staining within an hour. So I'm using Dark Walnut by Varathane. It's one of my favorite colors and my favorite wood stains. It looks pretty gross. I've already done one coat, and I neglected to film that, but this is my second coat, and I'm just trying to go with the grain a little bit, but it's really not super imperative. If you have a grain, like if you have a top that the grain all goes one direction, you want to make sure and wipe off in the direction of that grain. So here I'm trying to go around the ends, at the circle at the outside, and then kind of trying to do those little triangles in the direction that they are moving in. I'm just wiping off that surface, making sure it's good and dry. And then I am actually going to let that dry overnight. So this is the next day. I'm using Minwax polyurethane. It's an oil-based wipe-on poly. This is to seal your finish. You can't just stain a piece and then let it go. It has to be protected. So this is a top coat or a sealer, whatever you want to call it. It does not matter if you go in the direction of the grain for this kind of top especially. Wipe-on poly is very forgiving. I'm using a lint-free t-shirt rag to just wipe that on. And I'm not going to wipe it off. I'm just going to put a good amount on my t-shirt rag, and then I'm going through in long, smooth strokes, overlapping them just a little bit to cover my area. This is going to protect my piece. It makes it beautiful. It has a little bit of a satin finish. Just follow the directions on the can. I just encourage you to read through those and make sure you're following the directions on the can. This is pretty foolproof for a top coat. I'm going to put 3 coats of that on my piece. Here I am. I've did a little light kind of sanding off with actually a little paper bag when it dries in between coats, except for my last coat. Now, after it dries, I'm done. And let's take a look at what it looked like when I bought it, and then look at it now. Oh my goodness, that black with that beautiful bold black from Farmhouse Paint and that beautiful top that I've stained and protected with my top coat. It just turned out so wonderfully. Just a reminder that I've linked all of my products that I've used here in my description below. If you have any questions, I know I went really quickly. You can watch the video back again or just send me a comment in the comments section. I'll try to answer your questions. I hope you've enjoyed this video and I hope it's helpful. Thank you for watching today. I am so glad you're here and I hope you learned something and this has been helpful to you. If you would like to subscribe to my channel, I encourage you to tap on that bell button and hit the subscribe button so that you can be notified when I have new videos that come out. Till next time, bye-bye.